Welcome to this video tutorial in which we will be looking at several theorists concerning what ideas they have to offer about religion and secularization. We will look at what we mean by secularization as well as modernization and discern how these have relevance to the study of religion. So, what is secularization? Although we will see that answers to this question are indeed complex, secularization can very generally mean that the more modernized and advanced a society becomes, the less religious it will be. In other words, it identifies the diminishment of religion's importance. As the sociologist Peter Berger claimed, secularization is a societal phenomenon involving the process by which sectors in society and culture are removed from the domination of religious institutions and symbols. Perhaps a helpful overview of secularization was offered by Larry Scheiner, who distinguishes between 6 main interpretations. For example, in his first premise, he notes how religion is weakened as previously accepted religious dogmas, symbols, and institutions lose their prestige and importance. Second, the content of religion changes by becoming more like other social commitments because attention is diverted from the supernatural and the hereafter towards secular issues. Third, religion becomes more inwardly focused, resulting in society becoming less religious and for religion to cease affecting social life outside the religion itself. 4. Religious faith and institutions lose their religious nature and are transformed into non-religious ideas and social institutions. Institutions that previously were seen as religious institutions of creation become secular human institutions. 5. The world is desacralized as human life, nature, and society are explained from the premise of reason, not as a result of actions of divine powers. Sixth and finally, a utilitarian and reasonable rationale for all choices and actions replaces traditional values and actions. Obviously, there's much Scheiner includes here, but the most important point he identifies as secularization would be the decrease in religiosity, in religious tradition, the changes of focus from the supernatural towards secular issues, and that humans no longer appeal to divine powers as explanations for phenomena. If true, this would suggest that fewer people are embracing, for example, Christianity today in the West, and that fewer Westerners accept religious symbols like the Bible or Jesus Christ than has historically been the case. These symbols are, to many, no longer of ultimate and primary importance. So, God, for example, might be something to pray to when life gets tough. The Bible is just a book detailing the events, exploits, and beliefs of ancient cultures, and Jesus Christ was merely a religious sage of great wisdom. Further, institutions that were previously located in the province of religion are now mostly secular organizations. So, political bodies, hospitals, shelters, social welfare, and charities, for example, are mostly now secular institutions that do not appeal to divine or religious tenets. The same can be said for institutions of law and the faculties of the university. For many people, the world has become desacralized. What has traditionally been viewed as belonging to the province of the sacred, such as things like morality, culture, the human being, and more, are now no longer necessarily religious. They are also the domain of human reason. For example, most ethical theories in moral philosophy do not appeal to God, religion, or the divine, but use human reason to ground ethical and unethical behavior. We find another helpful view of secularization in the typology offered by the sociologist Jose Casanova. Casanova outlines 3 versions of secularization. Number 1, the differentiation hypothesis. Here, religion is no longer the single most pervasive organizing structure in society. Religion has become one of several specialized social subsystems, each of which has its place in society and none of which can be said to organize all the rest. Second, there's the decline hypothesis, which notes how religious practices are waning. Emphasis is put on the fact that people are becoming less inclined to identify as religious or to participate in religious rituals and institutions. Third and finally, there's the privatization hypothesis, which suggests that religion is increasingly becoming a private affair of diminishing public significance. What Casanova has stated here is mostly self-evident. He notes how religion is no longer the most powerful social system, that fewer persons engage in religious practices and institutions, and that religion is becoming more a private affair than a public one. Another scholar by the name Brian Wilson offers similar insights. In his view, religion no longer legitimates political power and legislation as it once did, that it plays a lesser role in the socialization of children and has less domination over cultural life. It is also no longer used for the interpretation of world events. In brief, secularization means that religion becomes less important for the functioning of the social system. The French sociologist Yves Lambert said that secularization supposes religion's decline in overall participation and membership. We now arrive at classifying secularization theories into moderate and extreme types. Where moderate types of secularization are concerned, this is simply to observe how religion's influence has diminished in society. It is to notice how religion does not have the social power that it once did, and that it is now just one of several specialized social subsystems. The influence of religion has withdrawn from the areas it once commanded, such as the legal courts, the military, and in the penal institutions. The extreme secularization hypothesis, however, is far more radical because it posits the disappearance of religion itself. There are few advocates of this version, but Auguste Comte was one such advocate to hold to this view. Comte envisioned that all religious theological thought would become irrelevant as people came to adopt what he termed positive science. He supported his view by offering an evolutionary scheme of consciousness that passes through three major stages: first the theological, then the metaphysical, and finally positive scientific stage. Each stage supersedes the earlier one and will conclude with the positive scientific stage. At this final stage, religious consciousness will no longer be relevant. Comte's view is obviously a radical one, as it supposes the possibility of religion and philosophy becoming totally obsolete. But what have sociologists made of these two versions of secularization? Well, it is clear that most sociologists have typically sided with the moderate view, and that very few have ever accepted the extreme version. There are many reasons for this. For example, religions continue to exist. They also continue to emerge, and they are followed by millions upon millions of people. As the anthropologist Mary Douglas argued, as long as there are social relationships and a collective ethos, the likes of religion, rituals, and myths will continue to persevere. And since there is little reason to think that social relationships will cease to exist, there is also little reason to think that religion will cease to exist. Thus, current debates in sociology focus on the moderate version of secularization. We might want to move on to some of the challenges that theorists have offered to secularization theses. So, perhaps the most influential critique has been offered by sociologist Rodney Stark. Stark has brought into question many of the assumptions and claims proposed by the proponents of the secularization thesis. He argues that the secularization thesis, which claims religious observance, belief, and practice has decreased since the Middle Ages, is false on many levels. He presents the following several points in great detail. First, no fewer Western people today attend church than was the case during the Middle Ages. Second, religious belief is no less prevalent in contemporary West than was the case during the Middle Ages. Third, the piety of historical Western European societies has been greatly exaggerated, which renders it objectionable as a point of comparison to the religiosity of modern Western European societies. Fourth, the Christianization of parts of Europe has been exaggerated and was not nearly as omnipresent as commonly assumed. Fifth, the so-called secular countries are not in fact secular, given the evidence of their internal religiosity. Sixth, scientists are no more irreligious today than they have been over the past century. Seventh, religion has experienced a significant revival in countries where atheism and secularism were previously forced on the population through violent and coercive state means. And finally, that secularization is mistakenly universalized, which is disproven by religion's vitality in Muslim countries. It is worth noting that some of Mary Douglas's ideas are relevant here. She claims that the secularization theorists present an exaggerated religious picture of the past. But she argues that there is no evidence to support the idea that the masses of ancient peoples in ancient times were completely focused on the spiritual or the religious, which are clearly sentiments we find in Stark's contention. It is also a fact that new religious movements have posed an issue for the secularization thesis. Roger Finke and Rodney Stark present a new paradigm that presents an image of contemporary religious movements that are active, influential, visible, modern, aggressive, and expansive. And there is indeed very good evidence for this claim. The organization called Inform, whose scholars specialize in studying new religious movements, has around 5,077 new and alternative religions on file as of 2019. That was an increase of 577 movements since 2014. In light of this, there is every reason to believe that new religions will continue to emerge globally. And although many of these traditions are small and will die out within a generation or two, others will prove significantly more successful and will go on to outlive their founders. This shows that religions are indeed adaptive, that they have adapted to modernity, have experienced fundamentalist reactions, and continue to develop new forms. As noted, Stark also challenges the fact that alleged secular countries like Iceland are as irreligious as they have been claimed to be. He argues that this is based on the mistaken assumption that low church attendance equates with low levels of religiosity. But this is wrong, because religiosity in Icelanders, for example, is still very high, despite only 2% of its population attending church. Also, as Stark noted, there appears to be an incompatibility with the secularization thesis and Islam. Stark shows evidence from several Islamic countries where modernization has the opposite effect of religious decline. There seems to be a profound compatibility of the Islamic faith and modernization, which is supported by several studies from various majority Muslim countries, suggesting that religious commitment actually increases with modernization rather than decreases. For example, in Java, Muslims who attended college and were in high status jobs were much more likely to pray the required 5 times a day, to give alms, and to fast in accord with orthodox Islamic practice than were Muslims with little education or in low status occupations. Similar trends were found in Turkey, where there has been a marked increase in the proportion of students holding to orthodox Islamic beliefs. It is likely that Peter Berger, who was once an ardent proponent of the secularization thesis, has since come to renounce his initial position, claiming that, quote, "Our underlying argument was that secularization and modernity go hand in hand. With more modernization comes more secularization. It wasn't a crazy theory. There was some evidence for it, but I think it's basically wrong. Most of the world today is not secular, it's very religious."